Okay. So not a whole lot to report today because it was more of a it's Shabbat here, so it was more of a relaxed day. We went to Shabbat services at Beit Daniel. Um, as you are well aware, our synagogue is affiliated with the Reform and Conservative movements. This trip, I've been doing stuff pretty much exclusively with the Reform movement because the trip is run through. Well, it's not run through the Reform movement, but it was organized by a Reform synagogue for rabbis who are ordained through the first through the well who are whose official affiliation is through the Reform movement, which is my union. In the past, I have done a trip for conservative rabbis actually, and there was that trip was uh, much more focused on the conservative movement. So it was nice to experience the reform movement. So Beit Daniel is like the main reform synagogue here in Tel Aviv. A lot of pretty well-known people go there, and it's a pretty amazing place. So we went to services there. It was the same place we went to services last night. This morning, no rockets, so that was good. And let me see. I think there's somebody in the waiting room. Um, uh, Rabbi Gilad Kariv was there and gave the Devar Torah today. Rabbi Kariv is a very interesting figure. Not only was he the head of the Reform movement, or as it's called here, the Israeli Movement for Progressive Judaism, here for a number of years, but he also was a political figure involved in the Labor Party. And I don't believe he's in Knesset anymore, but he kept getting so close to being elected to Knesset. And then in the last government with Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid as the prime ministers, he actually got elected as a member of Knesset, and so that was really exciting to have a Reform rabbi um, be elected as a member of Knesset. And he gave the Devar Torah, and he talked about one of the communities that was unfortunately had one of the worst massacres on October 7th was the community of Be'eri on the border with Gaza, and that was where the gentleman was from who we met with, who had lost his leg and whose wife and son were murdered. Was Barry, and ironically, Rabbi Karif pointed out that in this week's Torah portion, we read for the first time about Be'eri, that Esau, one of his wives' names was Be'eri. And Be'eri literally means like my well. And he talked about how this Torah portion also talks a good bit about Isaac. And what's interesting is that of all of our patriarchs, um, uh, Isaac is the only one who is born and dies in the land of Israel and never leaves the land of Israel and in his life. Abraham was born outside of the land of Israel, and Jacob leaves the land of Israel when he is, it wasn't called that yet, but he leaves the land of Israel, one to find a wife for himself, and then also when he's working to be able to marry Rachel. He's outside the land of Israel, and then he also leaves the land of Israel to connect with Joseph, and dies in, I believe it dies outside the land of Israel. So Jacob, but Isaac stays within the borders of the land of Israel the whole time. And so in this parsha where we read about Be'eri, we're also reading about the importance of being in the land of Israel, and we read throughout um, that the Israel that Jacob and others and Isaac built wells throughout the land to be able to sustain it and nourish it. So interesting Devar Torah that I enjoyed. Let's pull up my notes really quickly. Um, Following our Shabbat services, we uh, gave we met with some leaders of progressive Judaism and the IRAC, which is the Israel Religious Actions Committee here in Israel, and they talked about how, perhaps this war represents some hope. That I talked a bit yesterday after my meeting with the LGBTQ community um, about how the spouses and partners of LGBTQ individuals had not been entitled to benefits if their loved one was killed in war. And after this very heroic tale of this guy, Sagi Golan, who was killed running towards Hamas as a reservist on October 7th, 6 days before he was supposed to get married, the government changed the law, and even the ultra orthodox parties voted in favor of changing this law. So that was really incredible, and there's some people who have pessimism that it's going to go um, uh, there are people who have pessimism, but there's also people who have tremendous optimism that today is basically like September 12th was for us back in 2001, where we have a country here that's more united, that Haredim are volunteering like they never have before for the army, that Christian Arabs are volunteering for the army, that Muslim Arabs who are citizens of Israel feel more connected to Israel than they have in the past, and that same sex couples are being given more benefits now, and people are seeing the efforts of same sex, the efforts of the LGBTQ community and validating them, and also that reform rabbis are in the reform movement is really stepping up to help people at this time, going from community to community and seeing what resources they can get for them, what they need, and how they can provide counseling for them and support for them. And so there's tremendous hope that maybe through this horrible thing, it's not going to fix all of our problems, and there will be division again. But right now, people are starting to validate each other in a way they hadn't been in Israel. Um, but uh, anyhow, um, what we were talking about too, where we were hearing some frustration from the Israeli rabbis, was with particularly the reform movement and in America, and and liberal Jews in America, um, in that reform in that there are often this was kind of why this trip came to light. In case you missed it, this trip came into being. We had planned this trip before the war began, and it was a response to how in 2021 a group of rabbinical students, um, largely reform rabbinical students, but also conservative rabbinical students and Reconstructionist rabbinical students, dozens of rabbinical students wrote an open letter where they talked about the suffering of the Palestinians and condemning Israel's war in 2021 without a single mention of Hamas's rockets and all the Israelis living in bomb shelters. And we have this horrible crisis right now in progressive Judaism. It's frankly good for my job security, but it's horrible for them for progressive Judaism, which is that fewer and fewer people are choosing to become rabbis. And we don't know why that is. I don't know why it is, but fewer and fewer people are choosing to become rabbis, and there's a greater demand for rabbis than there. The demand outweighs the supply, and as a result, the rabbinical institutions are struggling tremendously financially, to the point that after over 100 years, 50 years, Hebrew Union College is closing the rabbinical program on their Cincinnati campus and is only keeping the LA and New York and Jerusalem campuses open. And so a consequence is that I think out of desperation for money, they are accepting students who I don't think should be accepted, to rabbinical school. And we're seeing, but you know what? People said that about me too. So we all have our opinions. But uh, I, we're seeing students who are anti-Zionist being admitted to the school and becoming rabbis. And I'm not being critical of Israel. I can be critical of Israel, as you all know, but who are like fundamentally against the state of Israel. And what these rabbis here in Israel were talking about is when progressive rabbis and progressive Jews are really anti Israel, that hurts them here, because the narrative that gets depicted in the media is that Reform Jews hate Israel. And they'll claim, oh, this Reform Jew did this, when the person might not even be Reform. If you hear like a Jew who is criticizing Israel, like, well, slamming Israel and creating anti Israel protests or supporting the BDS movement, they will say that this was a Reform Jew, even if it wasn't. And that doesn't mean we can't criticize Israel. They very much appreciated our outspokenness with with the judicial reform issue. They very much appreciated that. But an example that they gave, a couple examples that they gave too, would be were Facebook posts from colleagues of ours that were just uh, talking about Israel's genocide or ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians, or um, they talked about how the Union for Reform Judaism a few years ago had issued a public statement condemning Donald Trump's decision to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And the way that they saw it, I'm not saying they're right or wrong, because I see both sides to this. As Americans, we should make our voices heard when it comes to American foreign policy issues. But the way that they saw it, and they're right too, as Israeli reform rabbis, is here we are trying to grow this movement in Israel, and the media showed all this stuff of the largest movement of Judaism in the world that claims 2 million members as part of their synagogues, is releasing a statement saying that they condemn Donald Trump's move of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, when something like 90% of Israeli Jews supported this. Even the left wings, a lot of the folks on the left wing supported this. And they say that then reflects poorly on us, because Donald Trump's going to do it anyways. He's not going to say, oh, the reform movement doesn't want me to do it, so I won't. And he's not going to say, and Netanyahu isn't going to say, I just got a red alert on my phone that there was a town with a rocket fire, but so I'm going to kind of keep my eye and ear out to see if anything comes my way. But anyways, but they Netanyahu's not going to change his position because of what the reform movement says. And likewise, the reform movement just issued a statement calling for humanitarian ceasefires in Gaza, and they say, "Gosh, when the reform movement does that, it hurts us here. It hurts because everybody then hears that the way they hear it is that Reform Jews are against the war effort, or are against the government, or against the army, even though that's not the case. So it's something for us to think about. And another thing we talked about with that was how really Israel is the only place in the world where you can be a a left wing Zionist and not have to be apologetic for being a Zionist. In every other country in the world, including the United States, within liberal circles, you have to, it's taboo often to be a Zionist or uh, something that you are going to be debating. So that's, and to the degree, as I pointed out, that I'm not trying to make a statement here of who should and shouldn't be president, but Rashida Tlaib, the Palestinian American congresswoman from Michigan, Michigan, a swing state that is um, extremely has a huge Arab population, um, said that um, because of Joe Biden's support for Israel during this war, she's calling on her followers to punish Biden in 2024 and not vote for him. And so it's fascinating because you're seeing some liberals, far left wing folks, uh, who Israelis are calling woke Qaeda for their support of bin Laden now, are actually saying, you know what, because of Biden's support for Israel, we're willing to get Trump reelected. So to punish him and teach him and the Democratic Party a lesson for that. And then the thing I've been hearing from Israelis too, I actually feel really safe here, to be honest. Hopefully that will stay the same for the next couple of days. But I've been hearing just overwhelming gratitude from Israelis for me being here, what it means to them that we came, and also, um, hearing from Israelis that uh, they are scared for us. They're hearing about anti-Semitism growing in the diaspora and in America and on our college campuses. And they are deeply, deeply concerned for us. And they feel like that just as it's our duty to stand with Israel, is their duty to stand with us. And they are really scared for us. And they're saying, with what just happened and there being a war and everything, they say, thank God that we live in Israel and not the United States or not Europe, because we'd be really scared if we were. I didn't get any sirens today, but there was at like the Lod, which is where the airport is, and Ramla, kind of that area. There were some sirens and rockets, and so uh, I didn't. I didn't have to go to the shelter. Didn't hear any sirens, but I did hear the Iron Dome. I heard the booms of the Iron Dome from those towns that are not too far away from Tel Aviv. But God willing, no sirens today. Still none. Kind of looking out toward Gaza right now, keeping my eyes and ears open. But yeah, so that was it for today. Like I said, kind of a bit more low key of a day. We did a text study with rabbinical students from the Israeli program for Hebrew College, and tomorrow we're going to be going to Jerusalem and meeting with some organizations in Jerusalem and and doing some text study in Jerusalem, and then coming back here tomorrow evening. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, you can see on my Facebook Live, we ended the day by was a giant rally in support of the hostages here in Tel Aviv tonight, and we led a Havdalah service with families who we led a Havdalah service with families uh, who have members, families who have family members who are currently being held hostage. So we had a Havdalah service with them, and then there was a rally afterwards. Wearing my shirt from the rally, which says "Return them home now," and also everybody in Israel right now You see like almost everybody wearing these dog tags that say our hearts are held captive in Gaza. Bring them home now. And you can order some of this stuff and support the causes of this organization, which is trying to keep the hostages on the forefront of the minds of the Israeli public, pressure the government to do what they can for the hostages, and also is sending family members of hostages around the world to tell their stories and bring international attention to it. And you can go to bringthemhomenow.net and order stuff like this if you would like. So anyhow, that's about it from here today. A bit shorter today. But did y'all have any questions or comments for me? Let me see. I see that Matthew wrote in the comments. Rabbi, thank you for sharing all this. Daily briefings are a mechaya. Thank you. Please do convey in response that even as we will aim to do more to support Israel, our biggest challenge is Israel's sharp right turn politically since Netanyahu took over in 2009. That is the real reason for the rise in anti-Zionism among young Jews. Yeah, and I'm sure they would agree with that. And Dale, good to see you. If you make your way to Tel Aviv in the next couple of days, I'd love to see you. But don't worry if you can't. Stay safe. I heard that last night Spot got some rockets.
Rabbi, I'd love to ask if there was at the rally today, on the Promise podcast this week, they were talking about how the families of the kidnapped are, coming out against the government and criticizing the government. And there was recently a negotiation that apparently Netanyahu rejected to trade a certain number of hostages for, a 5-day ceasefire or something. And I don't even know how I feel about all
that. I don't know if he rejected it or if I don't know the details. I know what they were trying to negotiate was the release of 50 hostages for a 3-day ceasefire.
So did that come up in the protest tonight, and how did people seem to feel?
I didn't hear anybody talk about that specifically, but other than Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas in Gaza, I think Bibi Netanyahu is the most hated man in Israel right now. There are so many signs everywhere of Bibi blaming Netanyahu and pictures of Netanyahu with a bloody handprint on his face that says, our blood is on your hands, and blaming Netanyahu for this. And the yeah, so I saw a sign that had Netanyahu, a sticker that had Netanyahu's face on it, and a broken apart Israeli flag, and it said on it, "Bibi, the destroyer of Israel." Everyone I've talked to, and now keep in mind I am in Tel Aviv, so I'd be curious what people in Jerusalem, which is more conservative, would say. But everyone I've talked to has said he's done. He can't survive this. And the debate is whether we finish this war and then get him out, or whether we kick him out now. So it's mid-war. So we'll see what happens. I mean, he's in a lot of trouble. He is in a lot of trouble right now. He politically, the judicial reform was extremely unpopular, and even a lot of folks who supported him opposed the judicial reform and the way that was handled. He he is being largely blamed for the complete failure of what occurred in on October 7th. Him and his government, 70% of the army at that time was 70% of the army at that time was in the West Bank guarding a settler party for Sukkot that was seen as largely provocative and wasn't there to protect the southern border. And Netanyahu allowed money to come in to fund Hamas because he thought that would be good as a counterbalance to the Palestinian Authority. And the general consensus too is that he ignored. They knew Hamas was preparing for this stuff, but he didn't think they'd actually be able to pull it off, for one, and two, he was more focused on